Hello, my name is Lewis and welcome to day 30 of Decktober. Today we're looking at a $45 budget Grolnok the Omnivore deck tech. Grolnok says whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3, and whenever a permanent is put into a graveyard from your library, exile it and it gets a croak counter. You may play lands and cast spells from cards in exile with croak counters on. This deck is all about attacking with every single frog you own, milling to the absolute max and then getting all sorts of value from those croaky cards. And also having those empty library win cons to get the victory. Now, let's get straight into the budget deck tech. As always, we're starting off the deck tech hot with that ramp. First up, we have got Cultivate and Kodama's Reach to both search your library for 2 basic lands, putting one on the field tapped and the other into your hand. There's Farseek to search your library for an island, putting it onto the field tapped, and Nissa's Pilgrimage to search your library for 2 basic forests, putting one onto the field tapped and the other into your hand. We've got Harvest Season, search your library for X basic lands, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, putting those lands onto the field tapped, and Journey of Discovery, to get 2 basic lands into your hand, play 2 additional lands this turn, or entwine them to do both. There's Eureka Moment to draw 2 cards, putting a land onto the battlefield, and Growth Spiral to draw a card, also putting a land from your hand onto the field. We need plenty of ramp in this deck to get our frog army out quick and attacking so we can start that self-mill engine. There's Explore to play an additional land per turn and draw a card, and Arcane Signet to tap for either of those Simic colours. We have Simic Signet to pay and tap to add Simic, and finally, we have Sol Ring, because Sol Ring. Before we delve into our frog army, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for all things MTG. It's completely free to do, and it helps our channel grow and grow as we head towards 2,000 subscribers. Now we're looking at that massive frog army we're going to make. First on up is Froghemoth, that when deals combat damage to a player, you exile that many cards from their graveyard, putting a +1/+1 counter on Froghemoth for each creature card exiled that way, and gaining 1 life for each non-creature card exiled that way. And Croconura with Reach and Evolve to get those +1/+1 counters on it. For some fog type frogs, we have Haze Frog to flash in and prevent all of her creature combat damage this turn, and good old Spore Frog to have as that sacrificial option to prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn. There's Inurid Bark Gripper with that threshold to give it +2/+2 if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, and Excavating Inurid also with that threshold option to give it +1/+1 and Vigilance if you have those 7 cards in your graveyard. The more frogs we have on the field, the more we're attacking with and getting those mill triggers from Grolnok to help us potentially win the game. We've got a Inurid Scavenger with Pro Black that you may have to sacrifice on your upkeep, and Bloated Toad that is Pro Blue but you can also use as a nice cycling option if needed. There's Jade Avenger with that Bushido 2 to give it +2/+2 when it becomes blocked or blocks, and Shubtoad also with that Bushido 2. There's a Inurid Swarm Snapper that can be blocked as if it had flying that can also potentially block additional creatures, and Plaxcaster Frogling with Graft 3 to get and move those extra counters and give creatures with counters on them Shroud. We've got Burrog Befuddler with Flash that ETBs giving target creature -1/-0 until end of turn, and Galloping Lizrog that when ETBs you can remove any number of +1/+1 counters among creatures you control. If you do, put double the amount of +1/+1 counters on Galloping Lizrog. There's Omniban to tap and make target creature a frog with base power toughness 3/3 until end of turn, and Leapfrog that has flying as long as you cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. Finally, we've got Steeple Creeper and Whip-Tongue Frog that can both gain flying until end of turn. Beware those flying frogs. We've seen all of those froggos, now we're looking at all of the self-milling mayhem we've got planned. First up are the big win cons in Jace, Wielder of Mysteries that says if you would draw a card whilst your library has no cards in it, you win the game. Also having loyalty abilities to mill or draw cards. And Trusty Old Labman that also says if you draw a card whilst your library has no cards in it, you win the game. Jace is back again, this time with Memory Adept that allows you to put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard, and Beastly Sorcery Traumatize to put half of your library rounded down into your graveyard. There's Tunnel Vision to name a card, revealing cards off the top of your library until target card is revealed. You then put all revealed cards into the graveyard, putting the named card on top of your library. Perfect to name one of those win cons and put the rest of your deck straight in your graveyard, with those croak counters on them. And similar but different Mirror-Mad Phantasm to shovel into your library, drawing cards until you reveal Mirror-Mad Phantasm, putting it onto the field and the rest straight in your graveyard. Milling to win really is the name of the game in this deck, and there are plenty of ways to help get through your deck quick, as well as their attacking army of milling frogs. We've got Satyr Wayfinder, that when ETBs you reveal the top 4 cards of your library, you can put a land from among them into your hand and the rest go into your graveyard. And Weight of Memory to draw you 3 and mill you 3. Remember, not only do we have dozens of milling options here, but also combined with those frogs to help us mill, we could potentially run through our deck in no time at all. We've got Ruin Crab to mill you 3 whenever you play a land, and Crop Sigil to mill you a card on your upkeep, with the potential ability to sack this enchantment and get some creature land recursion. There's Eccentric Farmer to ETB and mill you 3, also letting you get a land from the graveyard to your hand, and Grapple with the Past to mill you 3 and get you some creature or land recursion. There's Jace's Erasure that says whenever you draw a card, you may have target player put the top card of their library into their graveyard, and Perpetual Timepiece to have as that option to tap and put the top 2 cards from your graveyard into your library. Also with the option to sack and put a load of cards from your graveyard into your library. For our final 2 big milling cards, we have Saga's The Binding of the Titans to make everyone mill 3, exiling cards to get some life and get a bit of recursion, and the Mending of Dominaria to mill 2 and get some creature recursion twice, and then return all of your beloved lands from the graveyard to the battlefield. You love to see it. Before we finish on up with all of those lands, we're looking at the best of the rest in this budget brew. We are starting with those counter spells to help control the board. First, there's Countermand to counter target spell, having its controller mill 4 and put away to counter target spell and have another tasty bit of recursion. There's Rewind to counter target spell and untap up to 4 lands, and Unwind to counter target non-creature spell, untapping up to 3 lands. There's Disappearing Act to have as another counter spell option, and Foil, a potentially free counter spell if you discard an island rather than pay its mana cost. For the final counter spell, there's Out of Bounds to counter target spell that other opponents can also help pay for, and some trusty commander protection we've thrown in with Swiftfoot Boots. We have one of my favourite new cards in Sareth the Viper's Fang to make those tapped attackers have Death Touch and all of your untapped creatures have Hexproof, and Acidic Slime that ETBs and destroys target artifact, enchantment or land. There's another one of my favourite cards in Crowsand Grip with that stack stopping split second mechanic to destroy target artifact or enchantment, and Elixir of Immortality to gain 5 life and shuffle your graveyard into your hand, just in case your opponents have destroyed some of those WinCon self-milling cards. Moving on to some recursion, we have Regrowth to return target card from your graveyard to your hand, and Road of Return to also return a card from the graveyard to your hand, or put your commander into your hand from the command zone, being able to do both if you pay that entwine cost. We've got some commander classics in Preordain to scry 2 and draw a card, and Brainstorm to draw 3 cards, then putting 2 from your hand on top of your library. Perfect if you want to get some perfectly timed Froggy Mill. Finally, we have Pedantic Learning that says when a land is put into your graveyard from your library, you may pay 1 to draw a card. As always, we're rounding off this budget brew with all of those lands. Starting off here, we have 14 basic island and 14 basic forest. There's always trusty Command Tower and Exotic Orchard to help fix our mana, and some more commander staples in Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse to tap, sack and get us some basic lands onto the field tapped. We have Temple of Mystery to ETB and scry 1, and Path of Ancestry to also scry 1 whenever we cast a frog. Finally, we have some Simic land mana fixers in Simic Growth Chamber and Simic Guildgate. Grolnok is a really cool new commander and a super fun option, especially for those who have always wanted to have a frog as their commander. I'm looking at you, Meme Master Steve. Be sure to check into our final day of Decktober tomorrow, where we'll be looking at a spooky Halloween themed commander. How is this month over already? There we have it, that is the $45 budget Grolnok deck tech. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for all things MTG. Check out our link tree in the description below for all of our social media and affiliate links. For now though, I'm all tapped out, so I'll see you in the next video.